Take a deeper look at the impact here. Joining me now live is student loan expert Mark Kantrowitz. He wrote the book, How to Appeal for More College Financial Aid. Mark, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
So, Mark, what more can you tell us about today's decision? Why did President Biden think that he had legal standing here?
Well, Solicitor General Elizabeth Prelogar did an excellent job of trying to defend the Biden administration's position on this. And I was actually surprised that it was a 6-3 decision and not a 5-4 decision because I thought that she had convinced at least one, maybe two justices that the state of Missouri did not have legal standing. It's a concept called third party standing, where one person cannot bring a lawsuit on behalf of another. And the state had taken a lot of steps to insulate itself from Mohila financially. It's not obligated to repay Mohila's debts. There's a lot of separation there. But the other justices did not agree, and they found that Missouri had legal standing. And from there, it was an issue along the merits of the case, and the major questions doctrine kicked in, where if a policy has major economic or political significance, it requires explicit authorization by Congress instead of by implication. And also, there's the separation of duties between the executive branch and the legislative branch. Only Congress has the power of the purse.
All right. So I understand what you're saying here about Congress and their involvement, or, the involvement that they should have had in this. But let's go ahead and talk about the fairness of the plan overall, because this all was born during the COVID pandemic, and the government was able to give out stimulus checks, PPP loans, which the majority will not have to be paid back because they're going to be forgiven. But then you have this debt forgiveness program, which isn't possible. Take a listen to what the president had to say earlier today. He spoke moments ago or earlier today, issuing a statement saying that he believes that the hypocrisy of Republican elected officials is stunning. They had no problem with billions in pandemic-related loans to businesses, including hundreds of thousands and in some cases millions of dollars for their own businesses. And those loans were forgiven. But when it came to providing relief to millions of hardworking Americans, they did everything in their power to stop it. Mark, what's your reaction?
Well, student loans is a polarizing issue that divides along political lines. And a key distinction in these two situations seems to be that the PPP program was established by Congress passing a law, whereas the student loan forgiveness was proposed by the administration without explicit authority by Congress.
So I want to ask you about your thoughts on the impact of all of this. Who is going to suffer the most in terms of demographics? I mean, who is most likely to carry this type of student loan debt?
Well, about 37 million borrowers would have qualified for forgiveness. It was disproportionately low and moderate income families with income up to $75,000. Pell Grant recipients would have received $20,000 in forgiveness, other borrowers $10,000 of forgiveness. There also seems to be some division along racial lines, where while the aggregate amount for Black borrowers is lower than the aggregate amount for white borrowers, the percentage of their income that would have been covered by the amount of forgiveness is much greater because they tend to borrow more to pay for a college education. So they may have benefited more. I also think senior citizens would have benefited more because, according to the GAO, a third of borrowers age 65 and older are in default on their student loans, and half of borrowers age 75 and older. And so they would have benefited very greatly from the president's student loan forgiveness plan.
So taking all of that into consideration, Mark, do you think that it would have been the right move to cancel some student debt, or do you think it would have had some sort of negative effect on the economy?
The impact on the economy would have been relatively minimal. I think it would have provided a lot of financial relief to struggling borrowers. I would have liked to see a plan that was more targeted at borrowers who have financial need, but it still would have provided a significant amount of financial relief. more than a third of borrowers would have their federal student loans completely erased. But what is a good policy isn't necessarily the same as a policy that can be enacted. And that seems to be a key issue here. When you have split control of Congress, uh, Congress is less likely to pass legislation unless there is bipartisan support for that legislation.
And we are waiting for the president to speak live, which he's going to be doing so from the White House in about 15 minutes from now. But do you think, Mark, that the president or the administration will have any other legal avenues in order to pursue this plan? Or do you think this is the end of the road?
Well, I think broad student loan forgiveness has reached an endpoint. It's game over. But there are still some forms of financial relief that the Biden administration can provide. There are pending regulations that would change the repay plan, an income driven repayment plan that bases your payments on your income as opposed to the amount you owe. The new plan would cut the monthly payments in half. It would cause your calculated payment to be zero if your income is less than 225% of the poverty line. That's up from 150% of the poverty line. And it would also provide some additional forgiveness. Currently, under repay, your remaining debt is forgiven after 20 or 25 years of payments. If you start off with a lower amount of debt, say under $12,000 of debt, your remaining debt would be forgiven within 10 years under the pending regulations. And you add a year for each additional $1,000 of debt. So $13,000 of debt would be forgiven in 11 years, and so on. That regulation has gone through a public comment period.
Mm-hmm.
It's just waiting for a final rule to be published.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Biden administration could potentially implement it earlier uh, if they're able to get the loan servicers to implement it quickly.
All right. Mark Kantrowitz is the author of How to Appeal for More College Financial Aid. Mark, thank you so much for your time today.